Welcome to Moon Mind Temple. I'm so grateful you're here with me tonight. If it feels right for you, take a moment to share in the comments where you are in the world and what time it is where you're listening. There's something beautiful about knowing we're all connected across different places and moments, finding the same peace together. Maybe grab a soft blanket, dim the lights, or simply let yourself settle into whatever position feels most comfortable. Tonight, we're going to discover something together that might just change everything. It's an ancient teaching from Buddhism called emptiness. And before you think that sounds scary or sad, let me promise you something. This teaching is actually one of the most peaceful, liberating insights that humans have ever discovered. When the Buddha first shared this wisdom over 2,000 years ago, he wasn't trying to take anything away from people. He was pointing to a natural freedom that was already there, hidden beneath all our worry and stress. You know that feeling when you're completely absorbed in beautiful music, or watching clouds drift across the sky, and suddenly all your problems seem to melt away. That spaciousness you feel in those moments, that's what this teaching is really about. The word emptiness doesn't mean your life is meaningless or that nothing matters. It actually means the opposite. It means that the solid walls of stress, the heavy weight of anxiety, the tight grip of worry, all of these are much more like clouds than like mountains. They're real, but they're also constantly changing, flowing, and ultimately workable. Tonight, we'll explore 5 different layers of this teaching together. Think of it like discovering 5 different rooms in a house you thought you knew completely. Each room will offer you a new perspective on why you suffer and how you can find genuine relief. We'll move slowly and gently, letting each insight settle naturally into your awareness. The Buddha once said, "Empty is the world." But he didn't mean empty of meaning or love or beauty. He meant empty of the sharp edges that cut us, empty of the solid barriers that trap us, empty of the permanent problems that we imagine can never change. As we begin this journey together, know that you don't need to understand everything perfectly. Just let these ancient stories and gentle insights wash over you like warm water. By the time we finish, you'll discover that the peace you've been seeking was never really missing. It was just hidden beneath some very convincing thoughts about how solid and separate everything is. Let's begin with a story from long ago, about a young monk who couldn't sleep because his mind wouldn't stop racing with worry. His discovery might be exactly what your heart needs to hear tonight. There once lived a young monk named Chen in a quiet monastery nestled between gentle hills. Every night, as the other monks drifted peacefully into sleep, Chen would lie awake in his simple bed, listening to his thoughts chase each other like wild horses. "Am I good enough?" his mind would whisper. "Am I making progress in my practice? What if I fail? What if I'm not worthy of peace?" Night after night, these questions would spin through his awareness, each one feeling heavy and urgent and absolutely real. The weight of these thoughts felt crushing sometimes. Chen would listen to his breathing, trying to find calm, but even his breath seemed to carry worry. "Why can't I be peaceful like the other monks?" he would wonder. What's wrong with me that I can't find rest? The harder he tried to push these thoughts away, the more persistent they became, like trying to hold beach balls under water. One morning, exhausted and discouraged, Chen approached his teacher, Master Lin. The old master was quietly sweeping the temple courtyard, his movements so natural and gentle that it seemed like the broom was moving itself. The soft whisper of bristles against stone created a rhythm like a peaceful heartbeat. There was something about the master's presence that felt like cool water on a hot day. "Master," Chen said, his voice heavy with tiredness, "I can't find peace. My thoughts about myself keep me awake all night. I worry about whether I'm good enough, whether I'm progressing, whether I even exist as the kind of person I think I should be. How can I find rest?" Master Lin continued sweeping for a long moment, the gentle sound creating a space of calm around them. A small bird landed nearby and began pecking at seeds scattered on the ground, completely absorbed in its simple task. The morning light filtered through the leaves above, creating patterns of shadow and brightness that danced slowly across the courtyard stones. Finally, Master Lin paused and looked at Chen with eyes that held both deep kindness and a hint of gentle amusement. "Tell me, Chen," the master said softly, "when you listen to the temple bell, where does the music live?" Chen felt puzzled by this unexpected question. He had come seeking relief from his tormented thoughts, and his teacher was asking about music. "I'm not sure what you mean, Master. The music comes from the bell, doesn't it?" "Ah," said Master Lin, setting down his broom with care and sitting on a smooth stone bench. "Let's explore this mystery together. When our temple bell rings at dawn, what creates the sound you hear?" "The bell," Chen replied, though something in his teacher's gentle tone suggested this might not be the complete answer. He sat down beside his master, feeling a slight lessening of the tension he had been carrying. But the bell alone, sitting silently on its post, makes no music at all. What else is needed? Chen thought for a moment, feeling like he was being led down a path he'd never noticed before. Someone has to ring it. Yes, exactly. And then what happens? Then the sound travels through the morning air. Good. And then I have to have ears to hear it. Wonderful, Master Lin nodded, his eyes sparkling with delight. So this experience you call hearing the temple bell, where exactly does it happen? Is it in the bell itself? In the person ringing it? In the air between? In your ears? In your mind? Chen started to answer, then stopped. The more he really considered this question, the more mysterious it became. The experience of hearing seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was like trying to catch water with his hands, or like searching for the exact place where blue becomes green in the sky. I don't know, Master. This not knowing, Master Lin said with infinite gentleness, is the beginning of wisdom. You see, Chen, you've been lying awake worrying about this thing you call yourself. But let me share with you what the Buddha discovered when he looked into this same mystery over 2,000 years ago. What Master Lin was about to reveal to Chen was the Buddha's first and most fundamental teaching about emptiness. This insight had transformed the lives of countless people throughout history, offering them freedom from the very same kind of mental torment that was keeping Chen awake at night. It was a discovery so profound that it addresses the root cause of human suffering itself. The Buddha taught that when we look carefully at any moment of experience, we find three parts, just like a musical performance. In a musical performance, there's a musician, there's a musical instrument, and there's the music itself. All three are needed for music to arise. Without any one of these elements, there would be no music. In the same way, the Buddha discovered that conscious experience always involves three components: sense objects, sense organs, and consciousness. Let me help you understand this through a story, Master Lin continued, his voice taking on the gentle rhythm of someone sharing ancient wisdom. Imagine a skilled pianist sitting down at a beautiful grand piano. Her hands are graceful and trained, capable of creating the most exquisite melodies. The piano itself is a masterpiece of craftsmanship, with strings perfectly tuned and keys that respond to the gentlest touch. Let's explore this together, using this image. When the pianist places her fingers on the keys and begins to play, what happens? Her skilled touch creates vibrations in the strings, and these vibrations become sound waves that travel through the air. This music, these sound waves moving through space, becomes what the Buddha called a sense object. It's something that can potentially be experienced, like the fragrance of a flower or the warmth of sunlight on your skin. The sense object exists independently of whether anyone is there to experience it or not. Now, if you happen to be sitting in the concert hall and you have healthy ears, these ears become your sense organs for sounds. Your ears are incredibly sophisticated instruments, more complex than the most advanced technology humans have ever created. They can detect the tiniest changes in air pressure and translate them into electrical signals that your brain can understand. Think about this miracle for a moment. These delicate structures in your head can distinguish between thousands of different sounds, from the whisper of wind through leaves to the crash of ocean waves. When the music from the piano reaches your ears, when sense object meets sense organ, something magical happens. The experience we call hearing arises naturally and automatically. This hearing, this awareness of sound, is what the Buddha called consciousness. It's not a thing or an object, but rather the knowing quality that makes experience possible. But here's where the Buddha's insight becomes revolutionary and deeply liberating. We instinctively say, "I hear the music," don't we? We imagine there's a solid, separate I that exists independently somewhere inside our body or mind, and this I is the one doing the hearing, the one having the experience. This seems so obvious and natural that we rarely question it. But when the Buddha looked deeply into this process, with the precision of a scientist and the wisdom of a sage, he discovered something extraordinary. This phenomenon of hearing is actually the result of what he called an automatic chain of causes and conditions. It's like a completely natural domino effect that happens by itself without any separate controller or experiencer needed. Contact between the pianist's fingers and the piano keys causes the music. Contact between the music and your ears causes the experience of hearing the music. Without a pianist or a piano, there is no music. Without music or ears, there is no hearing of music. Each part depends completely on the others. In this beautiful chain reaction, the Buddha asked, where exactly can we find a separate self that's in charge? Where is the independent experiencer that we imagine is having these experiences? It's like looking for the driver of a car that's actually driving itself. As the Buddha put it so precisely, the ear is empty of a self or of anything pertaining to a self. Sounds, ear consciousness, and ear contact are empty of a self or of anything pertaining to a self. He wasn't being abstract or philosophical. He was pointing to something you can investigate right now in your own immediate experience. Master Lin gently guided Chen through this same investigation. Chen, close your eyes for a moment and listen to the sounds around us. Chen did as his teacher suggested, and immediately became aware of a symphony of natural sounds. There were birds calling to each other in the trees, the gentle rustle of leaves in the morning breeze, the distant sound of water flowing in the monastery's garden stream. Now, Master Lin continued softly, notice what's actually happening as you hear these sounds. The birds create sound waves with their songs. These waves travel through the air like ripples on a pond. They reach your ears, which are like incredibly sensitive instruments tuned to detect these vibrations. Your ears translate these vibrations into signals that your brain can understand. And then, mysteriously, hearing arises naturally. In this entire process, where is the separate Chen who's doing the hearing? Chen kept his eyes closed and listened more carefully than he ever had before. A gentle breeze was moving through the bamboo grove nearby, creating a soft, rhythmic sound, like nature's own meditation bell. As he followed his teacher's guidance, something remarkable began to happen. The more carefully he looked for the hearer of the sounds, the more the sounds seemed to be hearing themselves. There was definitely hearing happening, vivid, clear, immediate hearing, but no separate someone doing the hearing. It was like discovering that what he had always thought was a solid wall was actually made of flowing water. The experience was still there, more vivid than ever, but the boundaries he had imagined were nowhere to be found. The Buddha applied this same careful investigation to all 6 senses. Yes, he considered the mind to be a 6th sense, just like seeing or hearing. He found that seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, and thinking all happen as automatic processes that arise when the right causes appear in the right conditions. Each sense works exactly like the hearing example we've been exploring. Let's explore this with the sense of sight to deepen our understanding. Right now, if you're in a place where you can see something, perhaps the device you're listening on, or the wall of the room you're in, or your own hands, notice what's happening in the process of seeing. Light waves are bouncing off objects around you, and traveling at incredible speed toward your eyes. Your eyes, which are even more sophisticated than the most advanced cameras ever built, focus these light waves and translate them into electrical signals. When these signals reach your brain through your optic nerves, the experience we call seeing arises automatically. Where in this natural process is the separate seer? Where is the independent you that's doing the seeing? The same investigation applies to thinking itself, which might be the most interesting of all. Thoughts arise in your awareness based on countless causes and conditions: your past experiences, your current situation, the food you ate, how much sleep you got, the conversation you had yesterday, the book you read last month, the weather today, your body's chemistry, memories triggered by a scent or sound. These thoughts appear in consciousness automatically, just like sounds appear when conditions are right for hearing. Where is the separate thinker that we imagine is creating these thoughts? Chen was beginning to discover what the Buddha had realized under the Bodhi tree centuries before. If you investigate deeply enough, you'll see that your personal experience is actually entirely impersonal. There is no separate you to whom experience is occurring. There's no experiencer of experience standing apart from the flow. There's only an endless, beautiful cycle of causes and conditions stretching infinitely back and forward in time, like an ocean with no beginning or end. But here's where this insight becomes intensely practical for our daily struggles with stress and anxiety. The Buddha connected this understanding directly to why we suffer and how we can find genuine relief. This was not just a philosophical discovery, but a practical key to ending unnecessary suffering. This cycle of causes and conditions, this flow of experiences, arising and passing away, naturally brings both pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Sometimes we hear music that lifts our hearts. Sometimes we hear sounds that annoy or disturb us. Sometimes we see beautiful sights that fill us with joy. Sometimes we see things that make us sad or afraid. Sometimes we have thoughts that make us feel confident and happy. Sometimes thoughts that make us worried, angry, or depressed. This is simply the natural flow of life. The Buddha discovered that what keeps us trapped in cycles of suffering and disappointment is what he called our clinging and avoidance. We desperately try to hold on to the experiences we like and push away the experiences we don't like. We become attached to pleasant sounds, pleasant sights, pleasant thoughts, and we resist unpleasant ones with all our might. All of this clinging and resisting is driven by what our imaginary self wants and fears. Think about the last time you felt really stressed or upset. Maybe someone said something that hurt your feelings, or you received news that disappointed you, or you found yourself in a situation you desperately didn't want to be in. Notice how the suffering came not just from the experience itself, but from your resistance to the experience. There was the actual event, perhaps some words spoken or a piece of news received, and then there was your story about how this event shouldn't be happening to you, how it was unfair, how it threatened or diminished the you that you imagine yourself to be. The event itself might have lasted only moments, but the suffering from resisting it might have lasted hours, days, or even weeks. This is what the Buddha meant when he said that clinging and avoidance are the fuel that keeps the wheel of suffering turning. But what if that threatened, diminished you is actually more like a mirage? What if it's a convincing optical illusion created by the habit of thinking in terms of my experiences and what I want and what threatens me? What if the one who feels attacked, the one who feels inadequate, the one who feels overwhelmed is no more solid than a character in a dream? Chen was discovering this for himself as he sat in the temple courtyard with his teacher. The morning sun was growing warmer on his face, and he could feel something loosening inside him, like a knot that had been tied for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "Master," he said softly, "if there's no separate me to have problems, then what about all my worries about whether I'm a good monk or whether I'm making progress?" Master Lin smiled gently, his weathered face radiating a peace that seemed to come from the deepest part of his being. "Those thoughts will still arise, Chen. Causes and conditions will still create the thought, am I good enough? Or am I making progress? But now you can see these thoughts for what they really are, just more experiences arising and passing away in the flow of consciousness, like clouds drifting across the sky. You don't have to identify with them or resist them or figure them out. You can let them come and go naturally, without giving them the weight of solid reality. This is the profound relief that comes from understanding what the Buddha meant by the emptiness of self. It's not that you disappear or become nobody. It's that you stop carrying the imaginary burden of being a separate someone who has to control everything, fix everything, and defend against everything. You discover that you exist as something much more spacious and peaceful than you ever imagined. The Buddha described this realization as the key insight that brings suffering to an end. To really see that our feeling of being a solid, separate self doesn't correspond to anything in reality is the discovery that unlocks the door to genuine peace. To live your life in accordance with this understanding is what the Buddha called nirvana. Not a place you go to after you die, but a way of being in this very life that's free from unnecessary suffering. Let me share how this might transform a difficult moment in your own experience. Imagine you're facing a challenge that usually triggers intense stress and worry. Maybe you have to have a difficult conversation with someone you care about, or you're dealing with a health concern that's been troubling you, or you're facing financial pressure that keeps you awake at night. Normally, this situation feels like it's happening to a solid, vulnerable you, doesn't it? There's a sense that this separate self might be damaged or overwhelmed or unable to cope with what's being asked of it. The stress feels personal, directed at you specifically, threatening your security and well-being. But what if you remembered Chen's discovery in that peaceful courtyard? You might begin to notice that even this stressful situation is arising from causes and conditions, just like hearing arises when sound meets ear. There are the external circumstances that are creating the challenge. There are your past experiences that influence how you interpret these circumstances. There are physical factors like how much sleep you got last night, and what you ate for breakfast. There are emotional factors from other areas of your life that might be coloring this moment. There are social and cultural influences that shape your expectations and fears. All of these conditions are coming together right now, and stress is arising naturally from their meeting, just like music arises when fingers meet piano keys. But where, in this natural process of conditions creating stress, is the solid, separate, vulnerable you that feels threatened? When you look for it with the same gentle curiosity that Chen brought to looking for the hearer of sounds, you might find something surprising. The stressful situation is there, yes. The thoughts and feelings are there, yes. The physical sensations of stress are there, yes. But that tight, threatened sense of a separate self that feels like it's under attack, that might be much more like a habit of thinking than a solid reality. This doesn't mean you become passive or don't take appropriate action. If anything, it means you can respond to challenges more effectively. It means you can respond to challenges from a place of clarity and peace, rather than from the fears and defenses of an imaginary separate self. You can address what needs to be addressed without the extra layer of suffering that comes from taking everything so personally. As Chen sat there in the growing warmth of the morning sun, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. A deep, natural peace was emerging, not because his circumstances had changed in any way, but because he was beginning to see through the illusion that had been causing his sleepless nights. The worried, inadequate Chen that had been tossing and turning wasn't as real as he had thought. In fact, it was more like a character in a story he had been telling himself. A story he could now see was just a story. "Master," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder, "I feel like I've been carrying a heavy backpack full of rocks for years, and I just realized I could set it down any time I wanted." Master Lin nodded with deep satisfaction, his eyes twinkling with the joy of seeing a student make this profound discovery. That backpack was never really there, Chen. It was made of thoughts about a separate self that was never more than a mirage in the desert of the mind. Now you can walk freely without that imaginary burden weighing you down. That night, for the first time in months, Chen slept peacefully. When thoughts arose about his progress or his worthiness or his adequacy as a monk, he remembered the temple bell and the gentle investigation his teacher had guided him through. He noticed these thoughts arising and passing away in the spacious awareness that he was beginning to recognize as his true nature. And he rested in the profound relief of no longer having to defend or improve or worry about an imaginary separate self. As you let these insights settle gently into your own awareness right now, you might notice that same spacious peace that Chen discovered. Right now, even as thoughts and feelings move through your experience like weather patterns across the sky, there's an awareness here that doesn't seem to have the problems that your thinking mind has. This awareness is peaceful by nature, open by nature, loving by nature. It doesn't need to be defended or improved or fixed. It's simply here, naturally present, like the sky that holds all weather without being disturbed by any of it. This awareness is what you really are, not the collection of thoughts and stories and worries that come and go like visitors in your home, but this open, peaceful presence in which all experiences arise and pass away. This is the first great discovery of Buddhist emptiness, and it's already enough to transform your entire relationship with stress, anxiety, and the challenges of daily life. But as profound as this insight is, it's only the beginning of what these ancient teachers discovered about the nature of reality and the path to complete freedom from suffering. As we'll explore together in the next part of our journey, there are even deeper layers of emptiness that reveal not just the illusory nature of a separate self, but the mysterious nature of everything we experience in this vast, interconnected web of existence. A few months after Chen's sleepless nights had given way to peaceful rest, another young monk named Dao arrived at the monastery. Unlike Chen, who had struggled with worries about himself, Dao had a different kind of restlessness. He was always trying to understand and categorize everything around him, believing that if he could just figure out where one thing ended and another began, he would find the peace he was seeking. Dao would spend hours sitting in the garden, pointing at flowers, and saying to himself, "This is a rose, that is a lily, this is soil, that is air." He felt a strange comfort in creating these mental boundaries, as if the world made more sense when everything had its proper place and clear edges. But despite all his careful categorizing, the peace he sought remained elusive. One afternoon, as autumn painted the monastery grounds in shades of gold and crimson, Dao approached Master Lin with a question that had been troubling him. The old master was sitting quietly beside the small pond, watching leaves float gently on the water's surface. "Master," Dao said earnestly, "I've been studying our teachings about emptiness, and I think I understand that there's no separate self experiencing things. But surely the things themselves are real and separate from each other. This pond is clearly different from that tree, and that tree is obviously separate from the sky behind it. How can I find peace in a world full of so many different, separate objects all demanding my attention?" Master Lin smiled gently and gestured toward a single leaf floating near them. "Tell me, Dao, where does this leaf end and the pond begin?" Dao looked at the leaf, feeling confident in his answer. "That's easy, Master. The leaf is floating on top of the water. The leaf is the leaf, and the pond is the pond. They're two completely separate things." "I see," Master Lin nodded thoughtfully. "And tell me, could this leaf exist without the tree it came from?" "Well, no," Dao replied, though he was beginning to sense that his teacher was leading him somewhere unexpected. "And could the tree exist without the soil that nourishes it?" "No, I suppose not. And could the soil exist without the countless leaves that have fallen and decomposed to create it over many years?" Dao was quiet for a moment, watching the leaf bob gently in the water. Something in his certainty about separate objects was beginning to feel less solid. What Master Lin was guiding Dao toward was one of the most profound discoveries in all of Buddhist philosophy. About 600 years after the Buddha's passing, a brilliant philosopher named Nagarjuna took the Buddha's insight about the emptiness of self and extended it to everything we experience. If the Buddha had shown that there's no solid, separate you experiencing things, Nagarjuna revealed that there are also no solid, separate things being experienced. This insight addresses something that troubles many of us in our daily lives. Even when we begin to understand that our sense of being a separate self might be an illusion, we still feel overwhelmed by all the different problems, challenges, and objects in our world. We look around and see so many separate things that seem to have the power to make us happy or miserable. Understanding Nagarjuna's discovery can transform this relationship completely. Let me guide you through this insight using something you're experiencing right now. As you listen to these words, you're having what seems like a clear, simple experience. You might say, "I'm listening to a teaching about Buddhist emptiness." This seems straightforward enough. There's you and there's this teaching and you're experiencing it. But let's do what Nagarjuna taught us to do. Let's try to find the exact boundaries of this thing you're experiencing. At first glance, this teaching seems to consist of words, spoken at a certain pace, containing certain ideas about Buddhist wisdom. That's a reasonable description. But as we investigate more carefully, something fascinating begins to happen. Could you be experiencing this teaching without the device you're listening on? Obviously not. The speakers or headphones that are projecting these words are actually an essential part of your experience right now. Without them, these words couldn't reach you at all. So shouldn't we include your device as part of what we call this teaching? But wait, could this teaching exist in your experience without the electricity that powers your device? Without the internet connection or cellular service that delivered it to you? Without the countless people who designed, built, and maintain all of this technology? When you really think about it, all of these elements are necessary conditions for your experience of this teaching right now. And what about your ears themselves? Could you experience this teaching without the ears that allow you to hear? These ears didn't appear from nowhere. They're the result of millions of years of evolution, aren't they? They're connected to your entire body, which came from your parents and their parents, stretching back through countless generations. Shouldn't we include all of this evolutionary history as part of what makes this teaching possible? As we follow this investigation, something remarkable begins to happen. We can't find any point where we can definitively say, here the teaching ends and the rest of the universe begins. What seemed like a simple, separate thing, this audio teaching, begins to reveal itself as a form in which the entire universe is appearing to you in this moment. Back by the pond, Master Lin was guiding Dao through a similar investigation. "Let's look at this floating leaf more carefully," the master said gently. "You said it's separate from the pond, but let's investigate. This leaf was once part of that maple tree over there. The tree grew it, using nutrients from the soil, water from the rain, energy from the sun, and carbon dioxide from the air. So this leaf is actually made of soil, rain, sunlight, and air, isn't it?" Dao nodded slowly, beginning to see where this was leading. "And where did the soil come from?" Master Lin continued. It came from countless leaves and branches and creatures that lived and died and decomposed over thousands of years. And the rain? It came from oceans that evaporated, forming clouds that traveled great distances before releasing their water here. And the sunlight? It traveled 93 million miles from a star that's been burning for billions of years. As Tao listened, his sense of this leaf being a separate, independent object began to dissolve. He was beginning to see what Nagarjuna had discovered, that what we call individual objects are actually meeting points where the entire web of existence becomes visible. This isn't just a philosophical curiosity. This insight has profound implications for how we relate to the stresses and challenges in our daily lives. Think about the last time you felt overwhelmed by a problem that seemed completely solid and insurmountable. Maybe it was a conflict with someone you care about, or a financial worry, or a health concern that kept you awake at night. When we're caught up in these difficulties, they feel like solid, separate objects that exist independently and have the power to harm us. But what if we applied Nagarjuna's investigation to these problems? What if that relationship conflict, for example, doesn't exist as a solid, separate thing, but rather as a meeting point of countless causes and conditions? Perhaps there's miscommunication arising from different communication styles learned in childhood. Maybe there's stress from work, affecting how both people respond to each other. There might be cultural differences, different expectations about relationships, past hurts that are coloring the present moment. There could be physical factors, hunger, tiredness, hormonal changes that affect mood and patience. All of these conditions and many more are coming together to create what we call this relationship problem. But where exactly does this problem begin and end? Where are its solid boundaries? The more we investigate, the more we discover that even our most troubling problems are actually fluid processes arising from causes and conditions, rather than solid obstacles blocking our path. Nagarjuna took this investigation even deeper. He noticed that things also cannot exist without their opposites. There could be no concept of front without back, no up without down, no good without bad. Everything exists in relationship, in contrast, in interdependence. Think about something as simple as the idea of tall. A person who is tall compared to most people might be quite short compared to a professional basketball player. A building that seems tall in a small town might look tiny next to a skyscraper. Tall has no meaning by itself. It only exists in relationship to short. The same is true for every quality we can think of: beautiful and ugly, success and failure, happiness and sadness. They arise together, define each other, and cannot exist apart. This insight led Nagarjuna to a profound conclusion about the nature of everything we experience. He said that nothing possesses what he called svabhava, independent, inherent existence. Everything is what he termed dependently originated, arising in dependence upon countless other things. As he wrote so beautifully, there does not exist anything that is not dependently arisen. Therefore, there does not exist anything that is not empty. Master Lin helped Tao understand this through a simple but profound example. Tao, look at that apple tree in our orchard. Can an apple exist apart from the tree it grows on? No, Master. Can the tree exist apart from the soil that nourishes its roots? No. Can the soil exist apart from the earth that holds it? No. Can the earth exist apart from the solar system it travels through? No. And can our solar system exist apart from the galaxy that contains it? Tao was beginning to feel a sense of wonder as he followed this chain of interdependence. No, Master, it cannot. So tell me, Master Lin said with a gentle smile, where does that simple apple actually begin and end? As this question settled into Tao's awareness, he experienced something that many people discover when they really understand interdependence. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of it all, he felt a profound sense of relief. If everything is interconnected, if nothing exists in isolation, then nothing, including his problems and worries, is as solid or permanent as it appears. But at this point, you might be feeling a bit puzzled or even concerned. If everything is empty of independent existence, does that mean nothing exists at all? Does that mean this conversation we're having isn't real? Does it mean nothing matters? This is a natural concern, and Nagarjuna actually addressed it directly. He explicitly refused what he called the wrong view that nothing exists. But he also said that the view that things exist independently is equally wrong. To him, both of these views are extremes that miss the complex, mysterious nature of how things actually are. Nagarjuna taught what became known as the middle way between these two extremes. Things don't exist in the solid, independent way we usually imagine them to, but they also don't fail to exist at all. They exist in this beautiful, interdependent way, like music exists, or like rainbows exist, or like reflections in water exist. Real, vivid, and meaningful, but not solid or separate. Think about a rainbow for a moment. When you see a rainbow arcing across the sky after a storm, it's undeniably beautiful and real. You can point to it, photograph it, feel moved by its beauty. But if you tried to travel to where the rainbow appears to be, you would never reach it. It has no solid location you can visit. The rainbow arises from the meeting of sunlight, water droplets, and your particular viewing angle. It's real, but it's also empty of independent existence. This is how Nagarjuna understood everything in our experience. Real and vivid, but arising from the interdependent meeting of causes and conditions, rather than existing as solid, separate objects. This middle way understanding brings tremendous relief when we apply it to our daily stress and worries. Think about a time when you felt completely overwhelmed by a problem in your life. Maybe it was a work deadline that seemed impossible to meet, or a family situation that felt hopeless, or a health concern that dominated your thoughts. When we're caught up in these difficulties, they feel completely solid and permanent, don't they? They feel like immovable mountains blocking our path to happiness. But when we remember Nagarjuna's insight about dependent origination, we begin to see these problems differently. That impossible work deadline, for example, isn't a solid, independent thing. It's arising from multiple causes and conditions, perhaps poor planning, unexpected complications, unrealistic expectations, lack of resources, or communication breakdowns. Each of these contributing factors is itself dependently originated. The poor planning might have arisen from being overwhelmed with other responsibilities. The unexpected complications might have come from factors beyond anyone's control. The unrealistic expectations might have cultural or personal history behind them. When we see problems this way, something remarkable happens. Instead of feeling like victims of solid, unchangeable circumstances, we begin to see that we're dealing with fluid processes that can be worked with skillfully. Since these difficulties arise from causes and conditions, they can also change when causes and conditions change. This doesn't minimize the reality of our challenges. They're still real, just like rainbows are real. But it reveals something hopeful about their nature. Since they're not solid walls, but patterns of interdependent causes, they're much more workable than they initially appear. Nagarjuna taught that when we really understand this interdependent nature of everything, including our suffering, we naturally develop both wisdom and compassion. We gain wisdom because we see that our problems aren't solid entities that can permanently block our well-being. We develop compassion because we see that other people's difficult behaviors also arise from complex webs of causes and conditions. That person who was rude to you at the store today, their rudeness didn't arise from nowhere. Maybe they received bad news that morning, or they're dealing with chronic pain, or they learned defensive communication patterns from a difficult childhood. Just as your own reactions arise from causes and conditions, so do theirs. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it helps us respond with understanding rather than reactive anger. Back by the pond, Tao was beginning to experience this shift in perspective. As he watched the leaves floating on the water, he no longer saw separate objects demanding to be categorized and controlled. Instead, he saw a beautiful dance of interdependence, water supporting leaves that had fallen from trees that were nourished by soil that was created by previous generations of fallen leaves. Everything was connected to everything else in an endless web of mutual support. "Master," Tao said softly, "I feel like I've been trying to capture clouds with my hands. All this time I thought peace would come from understanding where everything begins and ends. But now I see that nothing really begins or ends at all. Everything is just this continuous flowing together." Master Lin nodded with deep appreciation. This is what the great teacher, Nagarjuna, discovered. When we stop trying to make reality fit into separate boxes, we can finally rest in the natural flow of interdependence. This flowing is our true home. This understanding of interdependence begins to dissolve the artificial boundaries between us and them, between my problems and the world's problems. We start to see that we're not separate individuals struggling alone, but interconnected participants in the same vast, mysterious process of life unfolding. When you truly see interdependence, you realize that your well-being and others' well-being are not separate. The air you breathe has been breathed by countless others. The food you eat grew from soil, enriched by the remains of plants and animals from ages past. The ideas that inspire you have been passed down through generations of teachers and students. Even your capacity for love and wisdom has been nurtured by the care you received from others, stretching back to the very beginning of your life. This isn't just a philosophical understanding, it has practical implications for how we live. When we see interdependence clearly, we naturally want to contribute to the well-being of the whole web of life, because we see that we are part of it. Our actions ripple out into the world and eventually return to us, just as the actions of others ripple through the interconnected web and affect our lives. Nagarjuna wrote, "I praise that perfect Buddha, the supreme philosopher, who taught us relativity." He wasn't talking about Einstein's relativity, but about this profound understanding that everything exists in relationship, nothing stands alone. This teaching of interdependence is sometimes called the ultimate form of environmentalism. It shows us that there is no real separation between ourselves and our environment, between our inner peace and the peace of the world around us. When you remember interdependence during moments of stress, it can transform your entire experience. Instead of feeling like isolated problems are attacking a vulnerable self, you can see challenges as temporary weather patterns in the vast sky of interdependent existence. Just as storms arise from atmospheric conditions and eventually pass, our difficulties arise from the meeting of causes and conditions, and naturally change as those conditions change. Let me share a practical way to work with this understanding. The next time you're feeling overwhelmed by a problem, try this gentle investigation. Instead of seeing the problem as a solid obstacle, try to trace some of the causes and conditions that have contributed to it. You don't need to figure out everything. Just notice a few of the threads in the web. For example, if you're feeling anxious about a presentation you have to give tomorrow, you might notice several contributing factors. There's the actual presentation, but there's also your thoughts about how others might judge you. There might be old memories of times when you felt embarrassed or criticized. There could be physical factors like not getting enough sleep or drinking too much caffeine. There might be cultural messages about the importance of being perfect or impressive. Perhaps there's comparison with others who seem more confident than you feel. As you recognize these various threads, you might find that the anxiety feels less solid and overwhelming. Instead of being a monolithic problem, it reveals itself as a web of conditions that can be addressed skillfully. You could get better sleep tonight, practice relaxation techniques, remind yourself that everyone feels nervous sometimes, or focus on your genuine desire to share something helpful with your audience. This approach doesn't make problems disappear, but it makes them workable. It reveals that what seemed like a solid wall is actually more like a web that can be gently untangled. As the afternoon shadows lengthened around the pond, Tao felt a deep peace settling into his being. For the first time since arriving at the monastery, he wasn't trying to figure out where one thing ended and another began. Instead, he was resting in the natural flow of interconnection that had always been there. The pond, the floating leaves, the trees, the sky, his own awareness, all were revealed as different expressions of the same seamless wholeness. "Master," he said with wonder in his voice, "I see now why they call this teaching liberating. When I thought everything was separate, I felt like I had to control and manage each piece. But when I see how everything flows together, I can just rest in the natural wisdom of the whole." Master Lin smiled, watching a gentle breeze create ripples on the pond's surface. This is the gift that Nagarjuna gave to the world. The understanding that emptiness and interdependence are the same truth seen from different angles. When we see that nothing has independent existence, we also see that everything is intimately connected to everything else. This is the web of emptiness that holds and supports all life. As you rest in this understanding yourself, you might notice how it naturally brings both peace and compassion. Peace, because you no longer have to carry the burden of believing that you're separate from the world around you. Compassion, because you see that everyone and everything is part of the same interconnected web of existence. Your suffering and others' suffering arise from the same fundamental misunderstanding, the belief in solid separation, where there is actually fluid connection. This second layer of emptiness, the emptiness of all objects and phenomena, reveals that what we call the world is actually much more like a river than like a collection of separate rocks. Everything is flowing together, supporting everything else, in an endless dance of interdependent arising. When we align ourselves with this flow, rather than fighting against it, we discover a natural ease and grace that was always available to us. But this profound understanding of interdependence leads us to an even deeper question. If there's no separate self experiencing things, and no separate things being experienced, what about experience itself? This mystery was explored by another great school of Buddhist philosophy, and their discovery reveals yet another layer of emptiness that can transform how we understand the very nature of consciousness and reality. Several seasons had passed since Chen discovered the peace that comes from seeing through the illusion of a separate self, and Tao had found freedom in understanding the interdependent nature of all things. The monastery had grown quieter in some ways, more spacious, as both monks learned to rest in the natural flow of existence rather than struggling against it. But their discoveries had opened a door to an even deeper mystery. One evening, as the three of them sat together watching the sun set behind the mountains, a new question arose. The sky was painted in shades of orange and gold, and a profound stillness had settled over the world. Chen and Tao had been sharing their insights with each other, marveling at how their different discoveries seemed to point toward the same truth. "Master," Chen said thoughtfully, "I understand now that there's no separate self having experiences. And Tao has helped me see that the things we experience aren't really separate from each other either. But there's something I'm curious about. If there's no separate experiencer, and no separate things being experienced, what about the experiencing itself? Tao nodded eagerly. Yes, that's what I've been wondering too. Even though I can't find solid boundaries anywhere, there's still clearly something happening. Right now, we're seeing this beautiful sunset, hearing the evening birds, feeling the cool air. What is this awareness that seems to hold all these experiences? Master Lin smiled with the gentle delight of a teacher whose students were ready for one of the most profound insights that human beings can discover. What they were asking about had been explored in great depth by a remarkable school of Buddhist philosophy called the Yogacara. These were masters of both philosophical investigation and deep meditation practice, and their discovery would reveal yet another layer of the emptiness, teaching that could transform how we understand the very nature of consciousness and reality. Let's explore this mystery together, Master Lin said softly. But first, let me ask you both something. He gestured toward the orange glow that was spreading across the western sky. Chen, what's the difference between that beautiful orange color and your experience of seeing that orange color? Chen looked at the sunset, then closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Something in his teacher's question felt like it was pointing toward a mystery he had never noticed before. I'm not sure I understand the question, Master. The orange is there in the sky, and I'm here seeing it. Aren't they two different things? Are they? Master Lin asked with gentle curiosity. Could you have an experience of seeing orange if there was no orange to see? Well, no, Chen replied. Obviously, I can't see something that isn't there. Good. Master Lin nodded. Without the object, you cannot experience the object. This seems clear enough. But now let me ask you the reverse question. If you were not seeing this orange right now, would it exist? Chen started to answer quickly, then paused. This seemed like it should have an obvious answer, but something about the way his teacher asked it made him reconsider. Of course, orange would still exist if I wasn't looking at it. Colors don't just disappear when I close my eyes. There's orange in sunsets all over the world, in flowers, in autumn leaves, in paintings. Ah, Master Lin said with a twinkle in his eye. You know about orange in sunsets all over the world because you've seen sunsets before. You know about orange flowers because you've seen them. You know about orange in paintings because you've looked at paintings. In every case you can think of, how do you know orange exists? Tao was listening intently, sensing that they were approaching something profound. Through seeing it, he said slowly, every proof we have that orange exists comes from someone seeing it. Exactly, Master Lin smiled. If I close my eyes right now and you continue looking at the sunset, you'll see that orange hasn't disappeared. But the proof that it hasn't disappeared is your seeing of it. If someone else looks at a sunset while both of us look away, their seeing confirms that orange is still there. But notice something fascinating. Our experience of seeing is always the foundation upon which we confirm that anything exists. What Master Lin was guiding them toward was one of the most revolutionary insights discovered by the Yogacara masters. These brilliant philosophers and meditators had made a discovery that challenges our most basic assumptions about the nature of reality. Through their deep meditative experience combined with their philosophical genius, they found that what we call objects of experience are actually inseparable from what we call experience itself. "Try this," Master Lin suggested gently. "Close your eyes and imagine the color orange." Both monks did, as he suggested. "Now, can you imagine a color that you are not currently seeing?" "That's impossible," Chen said with wonder. "The moment I imagine orange, I'm seeing it in my mind. I can't think of a color without seeing it." "This points to something extraordinary," Master Lin continued. "Orange and seeing orange are like two sides of a single coin. Like the full and empty halves of a glass, one has no meaning without the other. One cannot be said to exist without the other." The Yogacara masters had discovered this same inseparable relationship between all objects and the consciousness that knows them. But they didn't stop with objects. They applied the same investigation to what we call the subject or experiencer of awareness. "Now let me ask you both something else," Master Lin said as they opened their eyes and returned their attention to the sunset. "Dao, right now as you're seeing this orange sky, would you be seeing it if you weren't seeing it?" Dao laughed softly at what seemed like an obvious question. "Of course not, Master. If I wasn't seeing it, then I wouldn't be seeing it. To see something, I have to see it." "Good." Master Lin nodded. "Your experience cannot occur if you aren't having the experience. This seems natural enough. But now let's ask the reverse question. Right now, as you look at this orange sunset, do you exist separately from seeing this orange?" This question hung in the air, like the evening mist that was beginning to gather in the valleys below. Dao considered it carefully, sensing that his answer might reveal something he had never noticed before. "If I existed separately from seeing this orange, then I would be in one place and the seeing would be in another place," he said slowly. "But then I would be experiencing something else entirely, and this orange would be seen by nobody. That doesn't make sense." "Beautifully discovered," Master Lin said with deep appreciation. "You see, there is simply no place where we can draw a line between you as an experiencer and your experience. You as an experiencing subject and your experience are completely codependent in their existence. This is like the ancient question of which came first, the chicken or the egg. They are paired opposites that mutually create each other and cannot exist apart. The Yogacara masters discovered that subject and object are exactly like this. They appear to be separate, but they actually arise together and have no independent existence. "So what you're saying," Chen said with growing excitement, "is that me, this orange color, and my seeing of this orange color are different names for one and the same thing observed from different angles. Now you're beginning to see what these great masters discovered," Master Lin replied with joy. When the Yogacara teachers used the term emptiness, they meant that the division of experience into subject and object is empty of reality. Subject and object are like heads and tails, two sides of a single coin. But heads and tails are only conventional terms we use to describe different aspects of one unified thing. In reality, we never find one without the other. Only the coin itself is real and contains within itself all of itself. Any divisions we may impose on it are artificial labels produced by the duality of our conceptual thinking. As the three of them sat in the gathering twilight, something profound was beginning to dawn in the awareness of both younger monks. This indivisible wholeness of subject, object, and the experiencing that connects them is how the Yogacara masters understood all of reality. To them, all that truly exists is experience itself. "Master," Tao said softly, "are you saying that everything we think of as the world is actually appearing in awareness like images appearing on a screen?" Master Lin's eyes lit up with delight. "That's a beautiful way to understand it," he said. "Let me share with you a way of seeing this that might make it even clearer. Right now, you're probably listening to my words through some kind of device," Master Lin continued, speaking as if he could see into the future, to this very moment when you might be hearing this teaching. Think about the screen or speaker that's making this conversation possible. On that screen, you could watch something joyful like children playing in a garden. You could watch something sad like news of natural disasters. You could watch something inspiring like people helping each other in times of need. You could watch something disturbing like violence or conflict. These are all completely different types of content that can appear on your screen. Each of these would provide an entirely different experience, Master Lin continued. Some might make you laugh, others might make you cry, still others might fill you with hope or concern. And yet through all of them, the screen itself remains completely unchanged. Watching something beautiful doesn't make the screen more beautiful. Watching something disturbing doesn't make the screen disturbed. The screen can display any content, but it is never affected by what appears on it. Chen was beginning to see where this was leading. "The screen is like our awareness," he said with wonder. "It can hold any experience without being changed by the experience." "Yes," Master Lin nodded. "But there's something even more important to notice. The screen on which images appear is not part of any particular image. At the same time, no image could appear without the screen. The whole time you've been watching any video, you've been looking at the screen, even though the screen itself is never the subject of what you're watching." "Until now," Tao added with a smile. "Right now, this teaching is pointing to the screen itself." "Exactly," Master Lin said, with deep satisfaction. "And this is what I want both of you to investigate right now. Look into your own conscious awareness, the screen on which all your experiences appear." As the last light faded from the western sky and the first stars began to appear, both monks turned their attention inward with a quality of gentle curiosity they had learned from their teacher. What they were about to discover was something that could transform their understanding of who and what they really are. Notice that our different experiences appear in different ways. Master Lin guided them softly. Chen's memories of his childhood appear one way in his awareness, and Dao's memories appear another way in his awareness. Chen's body sensations are different from Dao's. Your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions, all of these appear differently on the screen of your individual awareness. But what about the screen itself? What about the aware presence in which all these experiences appear? This question opened a doorway to one of the most profound discoveries that human consciousness can make. The Yogacara masters had found that while the content of awareness varies from person to person and moment to moment, awareness itself has certain unchanging qualities that are the same for everyone. Let's explore this together, Master Lin said gently. First, notice that your conscious awareness is luminous. By luminous, I mean that it naturally illuminates whatever appears in it. Whatever arises in your awareness is immediately and effortlessly known. Like how a mirror instantly reflects whatever appears in front of it. Could my conscious awareness lack this luminous quality? No, because then it wouldn't be conscious awareness at all. Chen nodded with recognition. It's like awareness is naturally awake, he said. Whatever appears in it is immediately known without any effort. Second, Master Lin continued, notice that your conscious awareness has no preferences. It lacks resistance and attachment. When something pleasant appears, like the taste of fresh fruit, it is fully received and then naturally released. When something unpleasant appears, like the pain of a minor injury, it is also fully received and then naturally released. Awareness itself doesn't try to hold on to the pleasant or push away the unpleasant. But Master, Dao interjected, I certainly have preferences and resistances. I definitely try to hold on to pleasant experiences and avoid unpleasant ones. Yes, Master Lin agreed with a gentle smile. But notice the difference between your mind and your awareness. Your thinking mind, your will, your personality, these may resist certain experiences and cling to others. But your conscious awareness is that which experiences these resistances and attachments. It is the field in which they appear as objects. The awareness itself remains open and non-reactive, like the sky that holds all weather, without being disturbed by storms or sunshine. This distinction was crucial to what the Yogacara masters had discovered. They found that what we usually call ourselves is actually a collection of thoughts, emotions, memories, and sensations that appear in awareness. But awareness itself, the knowing presence in which all these experiences arise, has a completely different nature. Third, Master Lin continued, notice that your conscious awareness is empty. It can hold any thought, emotion, feeling, and experience because it is itself empty of all thoughts, emotions, feelings, and experiences. It's like the space of an empty room that can be filled with furniture because it is itself empty of furniture. Could my conscious awareness lack this empty, spacious nature? No, because then it would be an object appearing in awareness rather than awareness itself. Chen was beginning to feel a sense of vast spaciousness as he investigated this. It's like awareness is the space in which everything happens, but it's not limited by anything that happens in it, he said with wonder. Finally, Master Lin said, notice that your conscious awareness is outside of time and space. Time and space appear in it as objects of experience, but awareness itself cannot be located anywhere within time or space. Right now, your awareness is present. This morning, your awareness was present. Tonight, your awareness will be present. It's always here and now, regardless of what appears in it. Could my conscious awareness belong to time or space? No, because then it would have form and duration, a beginning and an end. But awareness itself is the unchanging presence in which all change appears. As both monks investigated these qualities, something extraordinary began to dawn on them. Tao was the first to voice what they were both discovering. Master, he said with amazement, when I look for the qualities of my awareness, and Chen looks for the qualities of his awareness, we can't find any differences. The awareness that's aware of my thoughts, and the awareness that's aware of his thoughts, seems to be the same awareness. Yes, Master Lin said with profound satisfaction. When we compare what we call your conscious awareness with what we call my conscious awareness, we discover not a single difference between them. When we are comparing two things and we discover not a single difference between them, what must we conclude? That they're one and the same thing, Chen whispered, his voice filled with awe. This discovery lies at the heart of what the Yogacara masters called Buddha nature or Tathagatagarbha. They taught that even though we seem to lack a personal self, at our deepest core, we find the fully awakened, detached, and liberated awareness of the Buddha himself. The reason we don't normally experience these enlightened qualities is that our Buddha nature is temporarily obscured by layers of conditioning, like clouds temporarily hiding the sun. Remember how this teaching pointed to the screen on which experiences appear? Master Lin asked gently. The teaching didn't create the screen. The screen was already there the whole time. Unchanging, completely detached from its content, beyond the dimensions of whatever appears on it, the screen was always present. The same is true for your Buddha nature. Just as all the different videos anyone could watch appear on one and the same screen, so too all different personalities, all different life stories, all different individual selves are appearances in one and the same conscious awareness. Your personal history, my personal history, the stories of everyone who has ever lived, these are all appearances in the luminous mind of what the Buddhists call Tathagatagarbha. This insight had profound implications for how they understood not just themselves but everyone they encountered. As Master Lin explained, when you meet someone who seems very different from you, someone with different opinions, different backgrounds, different personalities, you can remember that their essential awareness is the same awareness that you are. Their thoughts and emotions may be different, their life story may be different, but the aware presence in which their experiences appear is not different from the aware presence that you are. The Buddha had said in the ancient texts, hidden within the defilements of greed, desire, anger, and stupidity there is seated the Tathagata's wisdom, the Tathagata's vision, and the Tathagata's body. All beings, though they find themselves with all sorts of defilements, have a Tathagata Garbha that is eternally unsullied, and that is replete with virtues no different from my own. But Master, Chen said thoughtfully, if this is true, why don't we always experience this enlightened awareness? Why do we still get caught up in worry and fear and anger? Master Lin smiled with infinite compassion. Think of it this way, he said. Imagine a perfect mirror that has become covered with dust over many years. The mirror itself is always pure and perfect, capable of reflecting anything clearly. But when it's covered with dust, its reflections appear cloudy and distorted. The dust doesn't change the essential nature of the mirror, but it temporarily obscures its clarity. Our Buddha nature is like that perfect mirror, he continued. It's always present, always pure, always aware, but it can become temporarily obscured by what we might call the dust of conditioning, old habits of thinking, emotional patterns we learned in childhood, cultural beliefs that limit our understanding. The goal of Buddhist practice is like gently wiping the dust off the mirror. This understanding transforms how we approach personal growth and spiritual development. Instead of trying to become someone different or achieve some special state, we begin to recognize what we already are underneath the temporary obscurations. We start to see that peace, love, and wisdom are not qualities we need to acquire, but qualities of our essential nature that we can uncover. There's a beautiful image in the ancient texts Master Lin shared. It compares our Buddha nature to pure honey, hidden in a tree, surrounded and protected by a swarm of bees. The honey is precious and sweet, but most people are afraid to approach it because of the bees. But if someone learns the right techniques, they can gently calm the bees and safely harvest the honey. Like the honey surrounded by bees, we all have this Buddha nature inside us, surrounded by the protective mechanisms of our personality, our fears, our defensive patterns. But if we learn the right approaches, meditation, mindfulness, compassion, understanding, we can gently work with these protective patterns and discover the sweetness that was always there. As the evening deepened and the stars grew brighter overhead, both monks were experiencing a profound shift in how they understood themselves and their relationship to the world. The anxious, worried Chen, who had once tossed and turned at night, was revealed to be a temporary appearance in an awareness that was naturally peaceful. The restless, categorizing Tao, who had tried to organize everything into separate boxes, was revealed to be a temporary activity in an awareness that was naturally spacious and whole-lime. Master, Tao said softly, I'm beginning to understand why this is called the ultimate teaching about emptiness. It's not that we don't exist, but that we exist as this open, aware presence, rather than as the limited, separate people we imagined ourselves to be. Yes, Master Lin nodded. And notice how this naturally brings compassion. When you see that your essential nature and everyone else's essential nature is the same aware presence, how could you not feel connected to all beings? Their suffering becomes your suffering because it's happening in the same awareness. Their joy becomes your joy for the same reason. This insight has practical implications for how we deal with difficult people and challenging situations. When someone is being rude or aggressive, instead of taking it personally, we can remember that their behavior is arising from the temporary obscurations in their awareness. The essential awareness that they are is the same awareness that we are. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it allows us to respond with understanding rather than reactive defensiveness. The Yogacara masters went even further with this discovery. What became their most profound teaching was that the entire world we experience is produced by consciousness itself. They saw all objects, phenomena, and experiences as projections of the mind, like dreams that seem completely real while we're dreaming them. Think about your dreams at night, Master Lin suggested. In your dreams, you encounter people, places, objects, entire worlds that seem completely real and separate from you. You might have conversations with dream characters who seem to have their own personalities and opinions. You might visit dream places that seem to exist independently. But when you wake up, you realize that everything in the dream, including the dream version of yourself, was actually a creation of your own mind. The Yogacara masters discovered that our waking experience has this same dream-like quality, he continued. What we call the external world is actually a projection of the deepest levels of consciousness. This doesn't mean the world isn't real, but it means its reality is more like the reality of a dream than like the solid, independent reality we usually imagine. This teaching points to something that modern physics has also discovered, that the apparent solidity of matter dissolves when we look closely enough. What seems like solid objects are revealed to be mostly empty space with tiny particles that are themselves more like energy patterns than like solid things. The Yogacara masters intuited this through meditation thousands of years before we had the scientific instruments to verify it. But whether we think of the world as solid and external or as dream, like, and mind, created, the most important discovery remains the same, Master Lin said with gentle emphasis. You are not a separate, limited self struggling in an alien world. You are the very awareness in which all experience appears. You are the screen, not just something appearing on the screen. Chen felt tears of relief and recognition flowing down his cheeks. Master, he said with deep emotion, I feel like I've been searching everywhere for home, and now I realize I never left home. This awareness, this is what I really am. It was never missing, never damaged, never in danger. This is what the great Christian mystic Meister Eckhart discovered when he wrote, "The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love," Master Lin shared. Different traditions use different words, but they're all pointing to this same recognition that the awareness that looks out through your eyes is the same awareness that looks out through every pair of eyes. As the three of them sat in the profound stillness of the mountain night, surrounded by the vast canopy of stars, they were experiencing what mystics throughout history have called the ultimate truth, not as a philosophical concept to be understood by the mind, but as a direct recognition of what they had always been. This teaching cannot really be communicated in words, Master Lin said softly. At best, words can point toward it, like fingers pointing at the moon. But the recognition itself happens in silence, in the depth of your own being. It's not something you can grasp with your thinking mind, because your thinking mind is something that appears in it. For those listening to this teaching right now, you might take a moment to investigate this for yourself. Notice that there's an aware presence here that's listening to these words. This awareness is not disturbed by whatever thoughts or feelings might be passing through. It's naturally peaceful, naturally open, naturally loving. This aware presence is not something you have, it's what you are. You might notice that this awareness has no problems. The thinking mind might have problems, the body might have discomfort, the emotions might be turbulent, but the awareness that knows all of these experiences remains untouched, like the sky that's unaffected by the storms that pass through it. This is your Buddha nature, not something you need to develop or achieve, but something you can recognize and rest in right now. The Yogacara understanding reveals that reality is not a collection of separate objects existing independently in space and time. Instead, reality is consciousness experiencing itself as the infinite variety of forms and experiences that make up what we call the world. You are not in the universe. The universe appears in you as awareness. This recognition naturally brings what the Buddhists call the end of seeking. When you realize that what you've been searching for is what you already are, the restless movement of trying to become someone better or find something more finally comes to rest. There's nowhere to go because you never left home. There's nothing to achieve because you already are what you sought. There's no one to become because you were never the limited person you imagined yourself to be. As the night grew deeper and the teaching drew toward its close, Tao spoke with quiet wonder. Master, I understand now why this is called the dance of awareness. Everything that appears, thoughts, sensations, perceptions, the whole world, it's all awareness dancing with itself. The dancer and the dancer one. Beautiful, Master Lin smiled, and noticed that this dance never stops. Even right now, as we sit in stillness, awareness is dancing as the experience of stillness. When thoughts arise, awareness dances as thoughts. When silence returns, awareness dances as silence. It's all the same awareness, appearing as the infinite variety of experience. This third layer of emptiness, the emptiness of the division between subject and object, reveals that what we call reality is actually the play of consciousness with itself. Like an actor who has become so absorbed in their role that they've forgotten their acting, consciousness has become so identified with the experiences it creates that it believes itself to be limited and separate. But through teachings like this, and through direct investigation, consciousness can remember its true nature. For you who are listening now, this recognition might dawn gradually, like the slow lightening of the sky before sunrise. Or it might come as a sudden flash of understanding, like lightning illuminating the landscape. However it comes, it brings with it a profound peace and a natural compassion for all beings who are also expressions of this same aware presence. The stress and anxiety that might have brought you to this teaching begin to lose their grip when you realize that they're temporary weather patterns in the vast sky of your true nature. They're real experiences, but they don't define or limit who you really are. You can let them come and go without being overwhelmed by them, knowing that your essential nature remains unchanged, like the screen that's unaffected by whatever images appear on it. As the three monks sat together under the infinite canopy of stars, they were no longer three separate individuals sharing insights. They were awareness recognizing itself in different forms, like waves recognizing that they're all expressions of the same ocean. The peace that filled the mountain silence was not something they had achieved, but something they had finally stopped overlooking. But even this profound recognition of our true nature as undivided awareness leads to yet another question, one that takes us to the very heart of what it means to be awake in this mysterious existence. If we are this pristine, awakened awareness, why does the world of suffering and confusion seem to persist? This final mystery would reveal the deepest and perhaps most liberating understanding of all. As the weeks passed, following their profound recognition of the dance of awareness, something unexpected began to emerge in the daily life of the monastery. Chen, Dao, and Master Lin had experienced such deep insights into the nature of emptiness that you might think their journey was complete. But life has a way of presenting us with even deeper mysteries, and the most profound teaching was yet to unfold. If you're feeling moved to connect with others on this journey, I gently invite you to share in the comments what time it is, where you are, and perhaps what you're hoping to find in these ancient teachings. There's something beautiful about knowing we're all exploring these timeless questions together, across different places and moments. Maybe find a comfortable position, perhaps with a warm cup of tea or a soft blanket, as we dive into what might be the most surprising and controversial discovery in all of Buddhist philosophy. One morning, as spring was beginning to paint the monastery grounds with delicate blossoms, two new students arrived seeking guidance. They were young women named Maya and Priya, who had traveled from distant villages after hearing stories of the peace that radiated from this mountain sanctuary. What made their arrival particularly interesting was how different they appeared to be from each other. Maya was quiet and contemplative, with eyes that seemed to hold depths of sadness from losses she had experienced in her young life. She moved slowly and spoke softly, often gazing at the ground as if the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. Priya, in contrast, was bright and energetic, quick to laugh and always ready with questions about everything she encountered. She seemed to bounce rather than walk, and her curiosity about life was infectious. As Master Lin welcomed them to the monastery, Chen and Dao observed these newcomers with interest. Here were two people who seemed as different as night and day, yet both were seeking the same thing: freedom from suffering and a deeper understanding of life's meaning. Over the following days, as Maya and Priya settled into the rhythm of monastery life, something curious began to happen. During the evening teachings, Master Lin would often ask them simple questions about their experience, and their answers revealed something that surprised everyone. "Maya," Master Lin said one evening as they all sat together in the garden, "when you feel sad about the losses you've experienced, what is it that knows this sadness?" Maya considered this question carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There's something in me that's aware of the sadness," she said slowly. "It's like there's a part of me that can step back and observe even the deepest pain. This observing part doesn't seem to be touched by the sadness, even though it knows the sadness completely." "And Priya," Master Lin continued, "when you feel joy and excitement about life, what is it that knows this joy?" Priya's face lit up with her characteristic enthusiasm. "Oh, it's the same thing," she exclaimed. "There's this awareness in me that knows when I'm happy, but it's not excited in the same way my mind gets excited. It's more like a calm presence that can hold any feeling without being overwhelmed by it." Chen and Dao exchanged glances, sensing that their teacher was guiding these new students toward the same recognition they had discovered about the nature of awareness. But what happened next surprised them all. "Now," Master Lin said with a gentle smile, "I want you both to look more closely at this aware presence that knows your experiences. Maya, what are the qualities of this awareness that knows your sadness?" Maya closed her eyes and turned her attention inward. After a few moments, she spoke with wonder in her voice. "It's completely peaceful," she said. "Even when I'm feeling upset, this awareness is calm. And it's like it has infinite space. There's room for any feeling without it becoming crowded or overwhelmed. It's also completely present, like it never leaves this moment." "Priya," Master Lin continued, "what are the qualities of this awareness that knows your joy well?" Priya too closed her eyes and investigated. Her response came with characteristic immediacy. "It's the same," she said with amazement. "Peaceful, spacious, and completely here and now. But there's something else too. It feels completely loving, not in an emotional way, but in a way that naturally embraces everything." What was unfolding was a direct discovery of what Buddhist philosophy calls Tathagata, often translated as Buddha nature. This teaching represents one of the most profound and revolutionary developments that emerged from the emptiness teachings we've been exploring. It's also one of the most controversial, as it seems to contradict everything we've learned about the absence of a separate self. To understand this apparent contradiction, we need to look carefully at what this teaching actually claims. The word Tathagata can be broken down into two parts. Tathagata was the Buddha's favorite way of referring to himself, and it has multiple meanings: one who has thus come, one who has thus gone, and mysteriously, one who has thus not gone. Garbha means womb, embryo, or essence. So Tathagata Garbha literally means Buddha womb or Buddha essence. The revolutionary claim of this teaching is that ultimate reality, the awareness we discovered in our previous exploration, actually possesses the enlightened qualities of the Buddha himself. Not just any self, but what the tradition calls the capital S, self of the fully awakened Tathagata. Master Lin helped the 4 students understand this through a simple but profound investigation. "I want all of you to consider this question," he said, as the evening shadows lengthened around them. "What is the difference between Maya and Priya?" This seemed like an easy question at first. Chen spoke up immediately. "Well, Maya tends to be quiet and reflective, while Priya is outgoing and energetic. Maya has experienced significant losses, while Priya seems to have had a more joyful life. Their personalities are completely different." "Yes," Master Lin nodded. "These are all differences in what we might call the content of their experience. Different thoughts, different emotions, different histories, different ways of responding to life. But what about the awareness in which all these different experiences appear?" Dao was beginning to see where this was leading. "You mean the screen on which their different life stories are playing?" "Exactly," Master Lin smiled. "Let's investigate this together." Maya's sadness appears in her awareness. Priya's joy appears in her awareness. But what about the awareness itself? Are there 2 different kinds of awareness, or is it the same awareness expressing itself through different personalities? This question opened the door to one of the most profound recognitions that human consciousness can make. What these ancient masters discovered was that while the content of awareness varies infinitely from person to person and moment to moment, awareness itself has the same essential qualities regardless of whose awareness we're investigating. Let's explore this systematically, Master Lin suggested. First, we've already established that both Maya's and Priya's awareness is naturally luminous. It effortlessly illuminates whatever appears in it. Could Chen's awareness lack this luminous quality? No, because then it wouldn't be conscious awareness. Could Dao's awareness lack this quality? No, for the same reason. So luminosity is a universal quality of awareness itself. Maya nodded with recognition. It's like every person has the same sun shining in their inner sky, she said softly. The sun is the same, even though it illuminates different landscapes. Second, Master Lin continued, we discovered that awareness naturally lacks resistance and attachment. It receives all experiences equally and releases them naturally. Maya, does your awareness try to hold on to pleasant experiences or push away painful ones? Maya considered this carefully. No, she said with surprise. My mind certainly does that, but the awareness that knows my mind's reactions doesn't seem to have those reactions itself. It's like it's naturally at peace with whatever appears. Priya, is your awareness different in this regard? Not at all, Priya replied. It's the same natural detachment. My personality might get excited or disappointed, but the awareness that knows these emotions is always calm and accepting. So this quality of natural detachment is also universal, Master Lin observed. Third, we found that awareness is naturally empty, spacious enough to hold any experience, because it is itself empty of any particular experience. This emptiness is not a blank void, but a fullness that's so complete, it appears empty, like the space in a room that can accommodate any furniture precisely because it contains no furniture. Chen was feeling a growing sense of amazement. Master, are you saying that this empty, aware space is the same in all of us? What do you think? Master Lin asked with a twinkle in his eye. Can you find any differences between the spacious awareness that you are and the spacious awareness that Tao is? As all 4 students investigated this question, they made a discovery that mystics throughout history have called the greatest secret of existence. When they looked for their individual awareness, they found the same awareness. When they tried to locate the boundaries between their consciousness and others' consciousness, they found no boundaries at all. Finally, Master Lin said, we discovered that awareness exists outside of time and space. Time and space appear in it, but it is never contained by them. It's always present, always here, always now, regardless of what story appears in it. Could any of our individual awarenesses be different in this regard? The answer was becoming obvious to everyone. As Priya said with wonder in her voice, we're all the same awareness, appearing as different people. This recognition is what the Tathagatagarbha teaching points to. The Buddha nature doctrine teaches that although we may seem to lack a personal self, at our deepest core, we find the fully awakened, enlightened awareness of the Buddha himself. We are not separate individuals who might one day become enlightened. We are already the enlightened awareness of the Buddha, temporarily appearing as separate individuals. The reason we don't normally recognize this is that our Buddha nature is temporarily obscured, like a perfect mirror covered with dust. The dust doesn't change the essential nature of the mirror, but it prevents the mirror from reflecting clearly. Similarly, our enlightened nature is temporarily obscured by layers of conditioning, learned behaviors, and mistaken beliefs about who we are. Maya found this understanding deeply comforting. So the sadness I feel about my losses, that's just temporary dust on the mirror, she asked. Yes, Master Lin replied with infinite gentleness. The sadness is real, and it deserves compassion and care. But it's not who you are. You are the aware presence that can hold even the deepest sadness with love and spaciousness. The goal of practice is not to get rid of difficult emotions, but to recognize that they arise and pass away in the vast sky of your true nature. Priya was equally moved by this understanding. And my joy and enthusiasm, these are also temporary expressions. Beautiful temporary expressions, Master Lin smiled. Like flowers blooming in the garden of awareness. Enjoy them fully, but don't mistake them for your essential nature. Your essential nature is the garden itself, the aware presence that can nurture any kind of flower that chooses to bloom there. This teaching had profound implications for how they understood everyone they encountered. As Master Lin explained, when you meet someone who seems difficult or unpleasant, remember that their essential nature is the same Buddha nature that you are. Their difficult behavior is like temporary clouds covering the sun. The sun itself, their fundamental awareness, is not different from your fundamental awareness. One of the most beautiful aspects of this teaching is how it naturally generates compassion. When you recognize that everyone shares the same essential nature, it becomes impossible to see others as fundamentally different or separate from yourself. Their pain becomes your pain because it's happening in the same awareness. Their joy becomes your joy for the same reason. But this teaching also raised important questions that had been debated in Buddhist circles for centuries. Some Buddhist scholars argued that the Tathagatagarbha doctrine contradicted the Buddha's original teaching about no self. If there's no self, how can there be a capital self? Wasn't this just smuggling back in the very thing the Buddha had taught us to see through? Chen voiced this concern one evening. "Master, I'm confused," he said honestly. "First, you taught me that there's no separate self, which brought such relief. Now you're teaching about Buddha nature, which sounds like a special kind of self. How can both be true?" Master Lin's response revealed the subtle but crucial distinction that makes this teaching so profound. The self that the Buddha taught us to see through is the personal, separate, limited self that believes it's independent and in control. This self is indeed an illusion, a case of mistaken identity. But the self of Buddha nature is completely different. It's not personal, not separate, not limited. It's the universal awareness that appears as all beings. To illustrate this, Master Lin returned to the screen metaphor that had been so helpful. The Buddha warned us against believing that any particular video is the screen, or that the screen can be found within any particular video. That would be like confusing your personal story with your essential nature. But the Tathagatagarbha teaching simply points out that the screen exists and that all videos are appearances on it. It's not saying that your personal video is enlightened. It's saying that what you really are is the screen on which all personal videos appear. Dao found this distinction helpful. So it's like the difference between thinking I'm a wave and recognizing that I'm the ocean appearing as a wave. Beautifully put, Master Lin smiled. The wave is real, but it's not separate from the ocean. Similarly, your personality is real, but it's not separate from the universal awareness that you essentially are. This understanding also addressed another common question about Buddhist practice. If we're already enlightened, why practice at all? Why did the Buddha spend 45 years teaching if everyone was already awake? Master Lin's answer revealed the practical importance of this teaching. Imagine someone who has fallen asleep and is having a nightmare, he said. In the nightmare, they might be running from monsters, or falling from great heights, or lost in a dark forest. the suffering in the nightmare feels completely real to them. Now, you could say that this person is already safe and peaceful. They're lying in their comfortable bed, completely unharmed. But until they wake up from the nightmare, this truth doesn't help them. They need to actually wake up to recognize their safety. Similarly, he continued, we are already the peaceful, loving awareness of Buddha nature. But as long as we're identified with the dream of being separate, limited individuals, we continue to suffer as if this dream were our reality. Practice is the process of gently waking up from this dream of separation. The beauty of understanding Buddha nature is that it transforms the entire approach to spiritual practice. Instead of trying to become something you're not, you're simply remembering what you've always been. Instead of struggling to achieve some distant goal, you're learning to recognize the enlightened awareness that's already present. Maya discovered this shift in her own experience. When I meditate now, I'm not trying to get rid of my sadness or become a better person, she shared. I'm just resting in the awareness that can hold even sadness with perfect love. It's like coming home to myself. Priya's experience was similar. I used to think I needed to control my energy and become more calm and serious to be spiritual, she said. But now I see that my enthusiasm is just one way that Buddha nature expresses itself. I can be fully myself while knowing that my true self is much vaster than any personality. This teaching also has profound implications for how we understand love and relationships. When you recognize that the same awareness looks out through every pair of eyes, love becomes not just an emotion, but a recognition of identity. As the Buddha said in the ancient texts, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Master Lin helped them understand this. This wasn't just a poetic way of speaking, he explained. It was pointing to a literal truth. When you help someone who is suffering, you are literally helping yourself, because it's the same awareness experiencing both your compassion and their relief. When you harm someone, you are literally harming yourself, because there's ultimately only one awareness appearing as many beings. This understanding naturally leads to what spiritual traditions call universal compassion. It's not based on feeling sorry for others or trying to be a good person. It's based on the recognition that others are not actually other in the deepest sense. Their well-being is your well-being because you share the same essential nature. As the months passed, all 4 students found that this recognition of Buddha nature was transforming their daily lives in practical ways. When someone was rude to them, instead of taking it personally, they could remember that the person's rudeness was arising from temporary confusion about their true nature. When they felt overwhelmed by their own emotions, they could rest in the awareness that remains peaceful, even in the midst of emotional storms. Chen found that his old tendency towards self-criticism had naturally dissolved. How can I criticize myself when I know that what I really am is this perfect, loving awareness? He said with amazement. I can still notice when my behavior needs adjustment, but there's no more of that harsh inner voice that used to torment me. Tao discovered that his compulsion to categorize and control everything had been replaced by a natural trust in the wisdom of the whole. When I remember that I'm not separate from life, but am life itself expressing as this individual perspective, I can relax and let life unfold naturally, he shared. Maya found that even her grief had been transformed. The sadness is still there when I think about my losses, she explained. But now it feels like the ocean grieving for one of its waves that has returned to its source. There's sadness, but also a deep peace knowing that nothing is ever really lost. Priya discovered that her natural joy had become even more radiant. When I know that my happiness is Buddha nature celebrating itself, it feels like the sun shining without any effort, she said with her characteristic brightness. There's no worry that the joy will disappear, because I know it's just one expression of something that's always here. But perhaps the most significant change was in how they related to each other. The monastery had become a place where 5 expressions of Buddha nature were consciously recognizing themselves in each other. Their conversations became deeper, their silences more profound, their simple daily activities infused with the sacred recognition of their shared true nature. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Master Lin posed a final question about this teaching. "There's something I want you all to consider," he said thoughtfully. "If we're already Buddha nature, already enlightened awareness, why does the world still seem to be full of suffering and confusion?" This question touched on what some consider the deepest mystery of existence. If our essential nature is already perfect and free, why does the dream of separation seem to persist? Why doesn't everyone simply wake up? "Maybe," Maya offered quietly, "it's like the ocean playing at being waves. The ocean doesn't stop being the ocean when it appears as waves. Maybe consciousness is playing at being separate individuals without ever actually becoming separate. And maybe," Priya added enthusiastically, "the play itself is perfect. Maybe even the forgetting is part of the dance, so that there can be the joy of remembering." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "It's like Buddha nature is so complete that it can afford to dream of being incomplete," he said. "So free that it can play at being bound." Tao smiled with deep contentment. Maybe there's nowhere to go and nothing to achieve, because the seeking itself is just another way that Buddha nature expresses its infinite creativity, he suggested. Master Lin listened to each response with obvious delight. "All of these perspectives touch something true," he said. "The Buddha himself, when asked directly whether the self exists, remained silent. When asked whether the self doesn't exist, he remained silent again. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to be lived rather than solved." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the 5 of them sat in a silence that was full of recognition and peace. They were no longer separate individuals learning about Buddha nature. They were Buddha nature, recognizing itself in various forms, resting in the perfect completeness that had never been absent, even for a moment. This 4th understanding of emptiness, the emptiness of the division between our ordinary self and our enlightened nature, reveals that what we've been seeking has been what we are all along. The hidden Buddha within is not hidden at all, except by our habit of looking for it somewhere other than in our immediate, present awareness. It's the most obvious and intimate reality, closer than our own breath, and yet it can seem like the most elusive mystery until the moment of recognition arrives. For you listening now, this recognition might be dawning even as these words are heard. The awareness that's receiving this teaching is the very Buddha nature we've been discussing. It's not something you have, it's what you are. Right now, in this very moment, you are the enlightened awareness that countless beings throughout history have sought. The peace you've been looking for is the peace that you are. But even this profound recognition of our enlightened nature leads us to one final understanding about emptiness, one that challenges even our most sacred concepts and reveals the ultimate freedom that lies beyond all views and beliefs. The seasons had turned full circle since Chen first approached Master Lin about his sleepless nights, and the monastery had become a place where profound wisdom seemed to flow as naturally as the mountain streams. Chen, Dao, Maya, and Priya had all discovered layers of understanding about emptiness that had transformed their lives completely. They had seen through the illusion of a separate self, recognized the interdependent nature of all phenomena, understood the dance of awareness, and awakened to their true nature as Buddha consciousness itself. You might think their journey was complete, but Master Lin had been observing something troubling in his beloved students. Despite all their profound realizations, they had begun to speak about emptiness and Buddha nature with a kind of certainty that made him gently concerned. They would discuss these teachings with newcomers as if they were absolute truths that everyone should understand in exactly the same way. They had, without realizing it, begun to cling to their insights as if these insights were solid possessions rather than temporary pointing fingers toward mystery. One morning, as the early mist was lifting from the valleys below, Master Lin called his 4 students together for what he said would be their most important teaching yet. They gathered in the small meditation hall, their faces bright with anticipation, ready to receive whatever wisdom their beloved teacher was about to share. "My dear students," Master Lin began, his voice carrying an unusual gravity, "you have all made discoveries that have brought you great peace and understanding. But I need to share with you something that might initially be disturbing. Everything I have taught you, everything you have learned, everything the Buddha himself said, all of it is ultimately untrue." The silence that followed this statement was profound and unsettling. Chen was the first to speak, his voice uncertain. "Master, I don't understand. These teachings have transformed our lives. How can they be untrue?" Maya nodded, looking confused. "The recognition of Buddha nature has brought me such peace," she said. "Are you saying this recognition is false?" Master Lin smiled with infinite compassion, knowing that what he was about to reveal was perhaps the most difficult and most liberating teaching of all. "Let me tell you a story," he said gently. "There once was a master who spent decades teaching students about the profound truths of existence. His teachings were beautiful, inspiring, and genuinely helpful. Students came from far and wide to learn from him, and many found great liberation through his words. But as this master grew older, he noticed something troubling. He saw that some of his most devoted students had begun to worship his teachings rather than use them as tools for awakening. They would quote his words as if they were sacred scripture. They would argue with people from other traditions about whose teachings were more true. They had become so attached to the beauty of his concepts that they had forgotten these concepts were meant to point beyond themselves. So one day, this wise master gathered his students and said something that shocked them deeply. "Everything I have taught you is a lie," he declared. "Every word I have spoken, every insight I have shared, every method I have given you, all of it is ultimately false." His students were devastated. But then, the master continued, "These lies have served their purpose if they have helped you discover the truth that cannot be spoken. Now you must let go of even my lies, or they will become prisons rather than keys." Tao was beginning to understand, though the understanding felt like standing on shifting ground. "Master, are you saying that even the most profound teachings are just tools to be used and then discarded?" "Let me share with you what the greatest Buddhist philosophers discovered about this," Master Lin replied. "They recognized that there are two kinds of truth, conventional truth and ultimate truth. It is conventionally true that my name is Master Lin and that I am your teacher. It is conventionally true that you are 4 individual students learning about Buddhism. These conventional truths are not false. They describe our shared reality in ways that allow us to function and communicate. But we have also discovered ultimate truths," he continued. "Ultimately, there are no separate individuals, no solid objects, no independent existence anywhere. Ultimately, all of us are expressions of the same awareness, appearing as different forms in the dance of consciousness. These ultimate truths are also not false. They point to the deepest nature of reality. The danger comes when we forget that even our most precious ultimate truths are expressed in conventional language. Language takes the infinite complexity and mystery of existence and squeezes it into words and concepts that the human mind can grasp. This is like trying to capture the ocean in a teacup. The teacup can hold some water from the ocean, and this water is genuinely ocean water. But the teacup is not the ocean. And if we mistake the teacup for the ocean, we limit our understanding rather than expand it." Priya was listening intently, her usual brightness tempered by the gravity of what was being revealed. "So, you're saying that even when we talk about emptiness or Buddha nature, we're still using concepts that can't fully capture the reality they point to?" "Exactly," Master Lin nodded. "There's a beautiful image used in the teachings about this. Imagine someone pointing at the moon on a clear night. A wise person looks at the finger to see where it's pointing, then follows that direction to see the moon. But a foolish person becomes fascinated with the finger itself and never looks up to see what it's pointing toward. Even worse, they might begin to argue with others about whether their finger is pointing more accurately than someone else's finger. Meanwhile, the moon, the reality that all the fingers are pointing toward remains unnoticed. All spiritual teachings, no matter how profound, are fingers pointing at the moon. The teachings about emptiness that have meant so much to you are fingers. The recognition of Buddha nature that has brought you peace is a finger. Even the words of the Buddha himself are fingers pointing at a reality that cannot be captured in words. This doesn't make the teachings worthless. They are invaluable fingers that point in the right direction. But mistaking any teaching for the reality it points toward is like mistaking the finger for the moon. Master Lin could see that this teaching was challenging everything his students thought they knew, and he knew this challenge was necessary for their complete liberation. There's something even more radical that some Buddhist texts reveal, he continued. In one of the most important Mahayana scriptures, it says, "There is no ignorance and no cessation of ignorance, no suffering and no knowledge of suffering, no cause of suffering and no abandoning of the cause, no cessation of suffering and no realization of cessation, and no path and no development of the path." Chen looked startled. "But Master, those are the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught. Are you saying the scripture is rejecting the Buddha's most fundamental teaching?" "This is why this aspect of emptiness is so dangerous," Master Lin replied seriously. "It appears to be saying that even the most sacred teachings are ultimately empty of the solid reality we attribute to them. But this is not nihilism. It's not saying that nothing matters or that the teachings are worthless. It's pointing to something much more subtle and liberating. You see, much of our suffering comes not just from our circumstances, but from our rigid views and opinions about those circumstances. We create mental maps of how life should be, how people should behave, how spiritual practice should unfold, how enlightenment should look. Then we suffer when reality doesn't match our maps. Even our spiritual concepts can become sources of suffering if we cling to them too tightly. We might suffer because we think we're not enlightened enough, or because others don't understand the teachings the way we do, or because the world doesn't reflect the wisdom we've discovered. Maya was beginning to see how this applied to her own experience. "I think I've been doing this," she admitted quietly. "I've been so attached to the idea that I've found peace through understanding Buddha nature that I get upset when I still feel sad sometimes. I've been judging my sadness as a sign that I don't really understand the teaching." "And I've been doing it too," Dao added. "I've become so convinced that interdependence is the ultimate truth that I get frustrated with people who still think in terms of separate objects. I've been trying to convert everyone to my understanding, instead of meeting them where they are. This is exactly why this final understanding of emptiness is so important," Master Lin said with deep appreciation for their honesty. "It's a safety measure, a reminder left by the greatest Buddhist teachers to take the Dharma seriously, really seriously, but not too seriously. To value all teachings, theories, models, and concepts, but not to value them more than we value life itself. Human thinking is simply too linear, too dualistic, and too limited to capture ultimate truth," he continued. "Our minds work by creating categories, making distinctions, building conceptual models. This is wonderful for navigating daily life, but reality itself is much more fluid, mysterious, and paradoxical than any concept can contain. The great philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein recognized this when he wrote, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." Chen was feeling both unsettled and liberated by this teaching. "So, does this mean we should stop studying Buddhist philosophy altogether?" he asked. "Not at all," Master Lin smiled. "It means we should study with what I call light hands. Hold your understanding lightly, like holding a butterfly. Hold it firmly enough that it doesn't fly away, but gently enough that you don't crush its delicate wings. Use teachings as skillful means to point you toward truth, but remember that the truth they point toward is beyond all teachings. This understanding naturally brings humility," he continued. "When you know that your deepest insights are still just fingers pointing at the moon, you become curious about how the moon looks from other perspectives. You become interested in how other traditions, other teachers, other students point toward the same ineffable reality. Instead of defending your understanding, you become eager to learn how your understanding might be deepened or expanded." Priya was nodding enthusiastically. "It's like realizing that everyone is trying to describe the same mountain, but they're all looking at it from different sides," she said. "My description isn't wrong, but it's not complete either." "Beautiful," Master Lin agreed. "And this understanding also brings tremendous freedom in how you relate to your own spiritual journey. You can engage fully with practices and teachings without the burden of having to get them exactly right. You can make mistakes, change your understanding, discover new perspectives, without feeling like you've somehow failed. You can be a sincere seeker without being a rigid fundamentalist. There's also a deeper freedom that comes from this understanding," Master Lin continued. "When you recognize that ultimate truth cannot be captured in concepts, you naturally become more present to what's actually happening, rather than to your ideas about what's happening. Your attention shifts from the map to the territory. You become more interested in this moment's actual experience than in whether this moment matches your spiritual concepts. This is a profound form of liberation." Maya was feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced before. "It's like I can stop trying to be a perfect Buddhist and just be present to what's true right now," she said with relief. "I can let my sadness be sadness and my joy be joy without having to fit them into any spiritual framework." "Yes," Master Lin said warmly. "And notice how this doesn't diminish the value of what you've learned. Your understanding of emptiness is still precious. Your recognition of Buddha nature is still transformative. But now these insights can flow more naturally because they're not carrying the weight of having to be absolute truths. They can simply be helpful perspectives that serve life when they're useful and step aside when they're not needed. This is what the Buddha meant in his final words to his disciples," Master Lin shared. "As he was dying, he said, 'Monks, be islands unto yourselves, be your own refuge, having no other. Let the Dharma be an island and a refuge to you, having no other.'" He wasn't telling them what they should be. He was pointing out what they already were. He was reminding them that the ultimate refuge is not in any external teaching or authority, but in their own direct experience of truth. Tao felt a profound appreciation for the completeness of this teaching. So, even depending on the Buddha's words too heavily can become a limitation. The Buddha knew this. Master Lin nodded. That's why he encouraged his students to test his teachings against their own experience rather than accepting them on faith. He knew that real truth has to be discovered personally, not inherited from someone else. The seeker of truth walks a path that ultimately only they can walk. You can have companions, teachers, guides, fellow travelers. But in the end, truth is discovered in the solitude of your own heart. This doesn't mean you should reject all guidance or teachings, he clarified. It means you should use them as supports for your own investigation, rather than as substitutes for it. Like using a ladder to climb to a rooftop. The ladder is invaluable for getting to the roof, but once you're there, you don't need to carry the ladder around with you. As the 4 students sat with this final teaching about emptiness, they felt something settling into place that completed their understanding. It was like the final piece of a vast puzzle that revealed the whole picture to be much more mysterious and beautiful than any of the individual pieces had suggested. There's one more thing I want to share with you, Master Lin said, as the afternoon light began to slant through the windows. Even this teaching about the emptiness of all teachings must be held lightly. If you become attached to the idea that all concepts are empty, then you've just created another concept to cling to. The ultimate freedom comes from being able to use concepts when they're helpful and set them aside when they're not, without being identified with either position. It's like learning to dance, Priya said with sudden understanding. When you're learning, you have to think about each step carefully. But once you know how to dance, the steps become invisible, and you just move with the music. The goal isn't to never think about the steps again, but to be free to think about them, or not, as the situation requires. Perfect, Master Lin beamed. This is the ultimate goal of all spiritual teaching, to make itself unnecessary by awakening you to the natural wisdom that was always present. Like a good parent who raises a child to be independent, or a good teacher who educates students to think for themselves. The highest compliment you can give to spiritual teachings is to graduate from needing them. Chen felt a deep gratitude welling up in his heart. Master, how do we thank you for teachings that have taught us not to depend on teachings? He asked with a smile. By living with the freedom and compassion that these understandings naturally bring, Master Lin replied. By being present to life as it actually is, rather than as your concepts say it should be. By holding all your views lightly while engaging fully with whatever life presents. By remembering that everyone is trying to find their way home to the same truth, even when their maps look very different from yours. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the 5 of them sat in a silence that was full of appreciation for the journey they had shared. They had explored the emptiness of self, the emptiness of objects, the emptiness of the subject-object division, the emptiness of the ordinary enlightened division, and finally, the emptiness of all concepts and views. Each understanding had prepared them for the next, like ascending a mountain where each level of elevation reveals a broader and more inclusive perspective. But more than understanding, they had discovered a way of being that was both completely engaged with life and completely free from the suffering that comes from clinging to any particular view of life. They had learned to dance with existence rather than trying to control or figure it out. They had found the freedom that comes from holding everything lightly while loving everything deeply. For you who have accompanied us on this journey through the teachings of emptiness, perhaps you too have tasted this freedom. Perhaps you've discovered that what you are is vast enough to hold any experience, peaceful enough to remain calm in any storm, and loving enough to embrace whatever appears. Perhaps you've found that the peace you were seeking was never actually missing, just temporarily overlooked in the busyness of looking for it somewhere else. The greatest gift of these ancient teachings is not any particular insight or understanding, but the recognition that you are already free, already whole, already home. Everything else, all the concepts, all the practices, all the teachings, are just different ways of pointing you back to this simple, immediate, ever-present truth. In the end, there is nowhere to go and nothing to achieve, because what you seek is what you are, and what you are has never been absent for even a moment. As the years flowed by like the gentle stream that wound through the monastery grounds, Chen, Dao, Maya and Priya had become teachers themselves, sharing what they had discovered with countless others who arrived seeking relief from the stress and confusion of modern life. But they never forgot that their role was not to give people new beliefs to cling to, but to help them recognize the peace and freedom that had always been present. What they had learned to share was how all 5 understandings of emptiness work together, like instruments in a beautiful symphony. The recognition that there's no separate self naturally leads to seeing the interconnectedness of all things. Understanding interdependence reveals the dance of awareness in which subject and object arise together. This recognition opens the door to discovering our true nature as Buddha consciousness itself. And finally, holding even these profound insights lightly allows us to live with complete freedom and spontaneous compassion. People would come to the monastery carrying the familiar burdens of modern stress, anxiety about their careers, worry about their relationships, fear about the future, overwhelm from trying to manage all the demands of daily life. What they discovered was that these teachings offered practical relief that went far deeper than temporary relaxation techniques. When someone understood that their sense of being a separate, vulnerable self was more like a habit of thinking than a solid reality, their relationship to stress transformed completely. Instead of feeling like life was happening to them, they began to experience themselves as the aware space in which all experiences arise and pass away. Challenges still appeared, but they no longer felt personally attacked by their circumstances. The teaching of interdependence brought a different kind of relief. People began to see that their problems weren't solid walls blocking their path, but temporary patterns arising from causes and conditions. This understanding naturally brought both hope and responsibility. Hope, because it revealed that difficulties could change when conditions changed. Responsibility, because it showed that their own thoughts, words, and actions were constantly influencing the web of interconnection. Many visitors discovered that this understanding of interdependence was the ultimate form of caring for the environment. When you really see that you're not separate from the natural world around you, environmental protection becomes as natural as taking care of your own body. Every choice, what you consume, how you travel, how you treat the earth, is recognized as caring for the larger body of life that you're part of. The psychological healing that came from these insights was profound. People learned to reunite with aspects of themselves they had rejected or tried to hide. Understanding emptiness revealed that what they considered their good qualities and bad qualities were all temporary expressions of the same aware presence. This brought a natural self-compassion and an end to the exhausting war with themselves that so many people carry. As one visitor expressed it, "I used to think I had to choose between my light and my shadow, but now I see they're both part of the same wholeness." It's like discovering that the mountain needs both its sunny slopes and its shaded valleys to be complete. The recognition of Buddha nature brought perhaps the most radical shift of all. People stopped trying to become someone better and started recognizing the perfection of what they already were. This didn't make them passive or complacent. Instead, it freed them to respond to life from a place of natural wisdom rather than from the desperate struggle of an imaginary separate self. Parents found they could love their children without trying to control their children's lives. Partners learned to support each other's growth without demanding that their partner fulfill all their emotional needs. Workers discovered they could engage fully with their jobs without deriving their sense of worth from their professional success. The final understanding that even the most profound teachings are just fingers pointing at the moon brought a lightness and humor that made spiritual life joyful rather than heavy. People learned to hold their insights with appreciation, but not attachment. They could engage in deep spiritual practice without the burden of having to achieve some perfect state. They could make mistakes, change their understanding, and discover new perspectives without feeling like they had somehow failed on their spiritual path. Perhaps most importantly, these understandings naturally generated compassion. When you recognize that everyone shares the same essential nature, despite their different personalities and life stories, how could you not feel connected to all beings? Their suffering becomes your suffering because it's happening in the same universal awareness. Their joy becomes your joy for the same reason. This compassion wasn't sentimental or overwhelming. It was practical and sustainable. People found they could respond to others' difficulties with genuine care without getting lost in emotional drama. They could offer help when it was appropriate and step back when their help wasn't needed, all without taking anything personally. The monastery had become a place where ancient wisdom and modern life met seamlessly. Visitors would arrive stressed and fragmented and leave with a deep sense of coming home to themselves. They carried these insights back into their busy lives, finding that rush hour traffic could become a meditation that difficult conversations could become opportunities for practicing compassion, and that even their failures could be embraced as part of the perfect unfolding of life. The teachings of emptiness had revealed what the Buddha had pointed to so long ago, that freedom from suffering is not something we achieve, but something we recognize. It's not a distant goal, but our natural state, temporarily obscured by misunderstanding. And in recognizing this freedom, we discover that what we've been seeking through all our spiritual search has been seeking us all along, drawing us gently home to the peace that was never actually missing,